Hello everybody and welcome back to the Not Applicable Formula 1 channel, where over the last 7 days, the Imola Grand Prix has been cancelled after Bernie left the sprinklers on for a little too long. Mercedes plan to slowly turn Williams into their second team continues, and why has Pierre Gasly been ruining Alpine Livestreams? Of course, the only place to start this week is the cancellation of the Imola Grand Prix due to the flooding that even the wet weather tyres couldn't have handled. Although everyone would have swapped to the Inters anyway.
You're completely useless!
The Emilia-Romagna track was flooded due to the persistent rain in the region. I think they saw something like 6 months worth of rain in just a few days, which saw the nearby Santorino River overflow and eventually flood the paddock. Following discussions between Formula 1 and the FIA, it was decided that the Grand Prix would be cancelled to ensure the safety of the teams and the fans. Formula 1 instead sending their thoughts to the people and communities affected by donating £870,000 to the relief effort in Italy. It was a small portion of the Formula 1 fan base that still thought the race should have gone ahead, but if you're seeing pictures like this and you can't just go one weekend without a Formula 1 race, I think you might want to try out like rowing or something. Grand Prix could have been rescheduled for a later date, but that would mean the possibility of a quadruple header somewhere in the calendar, which I don't think the Formula 1 teams would allow, or moving the Imola track to Japan for a weekend. Honestly, though, I think it's just best that the race is left off the calendar, as I'm sure it will be back on the calendar for next year and the 98 other races planned for 2024. Along with the news that the Grand Prix was cancelled, this also meant that the new qualifying format that was supposed to be tested in Imola has also been rescheduled. Because of course, what Formula 1 needs right now is another format change so that even the teams just have no clue what is happening. This is the news that Imola was supposed to be testing the third type of qualifying format that we've seen in 6 races. The plan was to reduce the number of tyre sets over the course of the weekend from 13 to 11, with qualifying having added restrictions. The team would have to use hard tyres in Q1, medium tyres in Q2, and would only be able to use the softs once they got into Q3. Although it's unlikely these rules would have actually been enforced, as if the session was wet, the tyre choice becomes free. If only they'd have known. Don't worry though, as this format is still set to be tested at a later race in the season, so we will definitely see a Ferrari Q1 exit on those hard compound tyres at some point. Also, with the Grand Prix being cancelled, of course the Formula 1 drivers got themselves a weekend off, apart from Yuki Tsunoda, who is so desperate to keep his incredible start to the 2023 season going, he was cleaning up the track himself. The Imola Grand Prix is of course the home Grand Prix of AlphaTauri, but I'm not sure many would have expected to see Tsunoda shoveling his way through the city. Yuki helps clean a flooded street by a hotel in Faenza before sharing his work on Radio Delta 1 and his Twitter to help raise money for the region. He might be small in stature, but he's an absolute hero. Also, it's not his fault, but I think the fact that Yuki was clearing up the streets whilst Nick de Vries was trapped in a hotel just summarises how their 2023 seasons are going so far. Plus, Liam Lawson is now top of the Super Formula standings, so you've got to feel a little bit sorry for Nick.
I'm fired, aren't I?
Oh, you think?
Back towards the track, and the team that seemed most annoyed by the cancellation of the race is Mercedes, as they were set to start rolling out their new upgrade package in Imola, codenamed the Silver Red Bull. To be fair, I would also be gutted as Mercedes, especially as they've just brought James Allison back in after months of designing boats. With the kind of upgrades that he could have offered the team, I'm sure they could have sailed their way to victory in Imola, because he designed boats. Toto has constantly talked about the need of a radical redesign at Mercedes, as they look to be set for another season where they're battling for, second at best? Imola was supposed to be the first race this season where the team started moving in their planned new direction, with the Spanish Grand Prix being their target for this new design philosophy to be fully in place. Basically, I think they saw what Aston Martin did last year in Spain, where they copied the Red Bull car, and they thought, we could do that this year in Spain. Aston Martin did it by hiring Dan Fallows, who used to work at Red Bull, and Mercedes have just hired Jane Poole, who also used to work at Red Bull. Like, genuinely, a Red Bull checking their hard drives as they leave. This gives me Dennis Nedry vibes from Jurassic Park all over again.
God damn it!
Mercedes now have to bring their Imola upgrades along with the extra upgrades intended for Monaco all at once, and I cannot wait to see a brand new Mercedes car 30 seconds off the lead, stuck behind Fernando Alonso like in last year's race when he was driving like it was the front of a parade. Talking of Toto, there's also been discussions this week that he's offered up Mick Schumacher to Williams if they were to replace Logan Sargent, just so that someone else can have a go at crashing that Williams car. Now, I think it's fair to say that Logan Sargent hasn't had an amazing start to his rookie season, being one of only 2 drivers without a point so far, crashing out in the Australian Grand Prix, hitting the wall in Baku, but I still think it's a little bit too early to be talking about him being replaced. However, Toto Wolff disagrees. He thinks Mick Schumacher, who's been the reserve driver at Mercedes for the 2023 season so far, after replacing Nick de Vries of all people, who of course is now at AlphaTauri, but Toto Wolff basically wants to get Mick back into a full-time seat. Of course, Williams are a customer team of Mercedes. They have taken Mercedes juniors in the past. Just think about George Russell spending 3 years with the team not that long ago, as well as their new team principal being an ex-Mercedes employee. Now, I know that Mercedes are trying to copy Red Bull's design, but also copying their model of having a sister team too, that might be a little bit too far. Although James Vowles has hinted that he'll be ignoring his old boss Toto Wolff and sticking with Logan Sargent, stating that Mercedes have no influence on which drivers are placed into those Williams seats. In other driver news, the Imola Grand Prix cancellation saw many drivers put out videos to fans. Georgian Lewis made a very professional video supporting the decision to cancel the Grand Prix. We've already touched upon Yuki Tsunoda giving his support to the cause, but Pierre Gasly decided to use the Alpine livestream to tell us about his favoured positions. Pierre was on a live with the other Alpine drivers, Esteban Ocon and Jack Doohan, when the trio was harmlessly asked by a fan if they prefer cats or dogs, to which Pierre said he's a fan of doggy because of course he did, and this along with the tripod comment during Gorilla Grid, I think that Pierre might be having a frustrating start to the season in more ways than one. Although Pierre might soon have bigger things to worry about, as Alpine have come out and discussed selling part of their team. Alpine Formula 1 boss Otmar anticipates more investment for his team, as the Renault Group is expected to make the sale of a minority share around about 25% of its racing division. The company have admitted it's open to capitalise on the financial valuation of its Formula 1 team assets. The news comes just a week after team CEO Laurent Rossi criticised the team for their efforts in comparison to Aston Martin. Maybe you should have held on to some of your drivers. If Renault were to make the sale though, Otmar seems to think that the team will have a huge injection of revenue for infrastructure, which would help the team to move forward in the future. So again, we'll be seeing the next year is our year build up from Alpine, just for some huge internal drama to happen, and then undoubtedly cause them to come crumbling back down into 5th place in the Constructors. And what kind of loser would settle for 5th place in the Constructors? That is the end of today's episode, so let me know your favourite news story from the past week in Formula 1 down in the comments below, and whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you next time.